Good Thursday morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope you're having a good morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Thursday, May 29th, 8 a.m. on the button on the East Coast. Futures this morning off of their highs, but still showing a gain for the broader averages. The Dow Industrial's up 136. The Nasdaq's up 276, about 1.25%, and the S&P 500 higher by 50 points. Investors reacting to a federal trade court ruling against President Trump's sweeping tariffs. The judge is citing a lack of authority to implement them. The White House filing an appeal immediately, writing this: it is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. President Trump pledged to put America first, and the administration is committed to using every lever of executive power to address this crisis and restore American greatness. Yesterday, the president took on economists criticizing the trade negotiation process. Watch this.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week.
I chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation.
Joining me now is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, good to see you. Thank you so much. I think the reporters at this point know how to taunt President Trump by using the term chickening out. What's your reaction?
Yeah, well, actually, I think if President Trump had just a minute more, if you go back into the room behind the Oval, he's got all his hats and things over there.
Yeah.
And he has a hat which is the accurate response to what that person said, which is Trump always wins. People, you go, look, a lot of people are wearing that hat. Trump always wins, and Trump was always right. Those are the two. But Trump does always win these negotiations because we're right. We're right that America has been mishandled by other governments, that our tariffs are taking them to the table, and they're coming in with massive concessions, opening up their markets to our products and lowering their tariffs on us. And so this trade negotiation season has been really, really effective for the American people. And it's unfortunate that people would attack it as the journalists did or the way the judges just did. You know, these activist judges are trying to slow down something right in the middle of really important negotiations. And the idea that the fentanyl crisis in America is not an emergency is so appalling to me that I'm sure that when we appeal, that this decision will be overturned.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 is what the courts are deeming to say, look, this does not equate to an emergency under this act of 1977. I know that the lawyers from the administration immediately appealed, but what do you want to say about this right now? Strike down of these global tariffs. What happens in the interim now, Kevin?
Well, what's going to happen is first we're going to see what happens on appeal, and we're very confident in our success there because, after all, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Americans have died because of mostly Chinese fentanyl and Chinese fentanyl coming in from Mexico and Canada. And the idea that having more people die from fentanyl than died in the Vietnam War, and that's not an emergency, that we need to use every power that we have to try to address, is ludicrous to me. But the second thing is that the trade law is very complex. And this part of the trade law is the thing that was most accurately used, very precisely used by USTR Trade Representative Jameson Geer, because this is the one where we actually have the most authority for doing what we're exactly doing. But there are 3 or 4 other ways to do it, and we don't have to go into the numbers right now. I think everybody will go back to sleep, Maria. But the fact is that there are measures that we could take with different numbers that we could start right now. There are different approaches that would take a couple of months to put these in place, and using procedures that have been approved in the past or approved in the last administration. But we're not planning to pursue those right now because we're very, very confident that this ruling is incorrect.
Kevin, I guess the threat here is, what does this do to any negotiations that are currently pending, right? I mean, you and Scott Bessent have been saying that we're going to see more deals happening. You've already locked up a new deal with the UK. You were talking about potentially India being close. And of course, the president has put the China 90-day changes in place. Does this ruling from these judges put a crimp in anything that you're working on currently?
No, it doesn't at all. We'll have to get Jameson out here, who's the trade lawyer, to go through the play-by-play. But if we put our eyes on the horizon, that what's going to happen is that in a month or two, you're going to look ahead and see that countries have opened their markets to American products. They've lowered their non-tariff barriers. They've lowered their tariffs. And all of the countries that have done that are being treated very respectfully and well by the U.S. The countries that don't do that are going to see some form of reciprocal tariff that's higher than what the people who are acting well get. And that's what you're going to see on the horizon. And if there are little hiccups here and there because of decisions that activist judges make, then it shouldn't just concern you at all. And it's certainly not going to affect the negotiations, because in the end, people know President Trump is 100% serious. And they also have seen that President Trump always wins.
So you said that we're going to see probably more deals, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, have said the same thing in the coming weeks. Do you still believe that?
Yes, I do. Yes,
okay.
I do. And I saw last week, at the end of the week, 3 that were basically ready for the president's decision. And I don't know if people have had that conversation with him yet, but yes, there are many, many deals coming, and there were 3 that are basically look like they're done.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll be watching for those 3 deals, obviously. Can you? Is India one of them?
I'm not going to talk until the president has to decide finally what's the final deal is. So what we think is pushed to something that's really great for America, he always adds a little bit more. He really does.
And what would be the best case scenario out of the European Union talks? Because, they are already saying we're on a fast track to getting a deal done.
I hope that's true. The European Union, the problem that they have that a lot of other countries don't have is, since they're an aggregation of a whole bunch of countries, then they themselves within the EU disagree about what we should do. And so part of the problem with the negotiating strategy of the EU is that they can't make up their own minds on many issues. And so giving them a little bit more time to work it out amongst themselves was a prudent call on the president's part. And I do think that it means that, by the end, that we'll have much more sensible positions coming out of the EU negotiators.
Well, look, I want to talk about the biggest deal of all, and that is the big, beautiful bill. The president says he's going to be negotiating aspects of this tax bill as GOP senators, along with Elon Musk, push back on the current state of affairs. We spoke with both Florida Senator Rick Scott as well as Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson this week. Here's Rick Scott and what he was talking about in terms of his main concerns. Watch this.
I support President Trump's agenda: secure the border, build up the military, make the tax cuts permanent. And I think we've got to do all these things. But let's live in reality for a second. We're running $2 trillion deficits. If we follow the path of the House bill, we'll have close to, I think, $60 trillion worth of debt in 10 years. What I want to get down to, I want the budget balance over the next 3 years. So to get that, we need to get the spending for the 26th budget cycle down to $6.5 trillion. Now, part of that's going to be through the reconciliation, which is mandatory spending, and part of that's going to be through our normal budget process, which will be in September.
Do you believe this is doable? Can you get this bill out the door after your modifications by the end of July?
Absolutely. I'm very optimistic we can get this done. We're having great conversations in the Senate, and I believe Republicans in both the House and Senate want to get the Trump agenda done and want to balance the budget.
Can you get it done by the end of July?
We can, yes. Before July 4th, if we break this into 2 parts.
So you don't want the tax cuts in part 1?
Not right now, no. Listen, $22 trillion additional deficit. This is not the time to cut taxes that don't promote economic growth.
So you want to do the tax extensions in part 2, is what you're saying?
No, part 1, I want to do that right away. Part 2 would be Trump's tax proposals. Let's try and simplify and rationalize the tax code. Let's do the work to go line by line.
No tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. That's part 2.
Do that later. We'll debate that later.
So, Kevin, what about that? Would that fly? That was Ron Johnson.
These are both good friends of mine I've known for many years, and they're serious about cutting spending, and so are we. And they're disappointed in the spending cuts in the House, and many people in the Senate share that view. And we're looking forward over the next few weeks to working with the president to get the spending cuts through that the Senate can pass, that they can agree about, and that the House can then agree about as well. Because in the end, we have to have a big, beautiful bill pass, and we're 100% confident that we're going to be able to do that. And the thing that I would say to my friend Ron Johnson is just that if you're disappointed in the end at what's in the big, beautiful bill, don't forget that there are a million other spending cuts coming because of DOGE cuts, because of other things we can do with executive order to reform different corners of the world. If we stop spending some of the wasteful spending, for example, the grants to chipmunks and so on that you've been reading about, if we stop spending that money, then we can rescind the money at the end of the year. And so we're very, very confident there's going to be a steady stream of spending reductions, big reductions in this bill, but reductions that are more to come. And they're going to be coming every month from the start of July after we do this bill until President Trump leaves office. That's the commitment that we've made to the people on the Hill, and it's based on an enormous amount of incredibly talented hard work by Russ Vogt at the Office of Management and Budget and his team, and they're going through everything with a scalpel and finding things that we can cut and piling them up in a rescission package and getting it ready to send up to Congress.
But Kevin, there's a lot of conversation now about balancing the budget in the coming years. I mean, is that really realistic when you've got the CBO current projections at $22 trillion 10-year deficit? That's $2.2 trillion a year, and the total debt going from $37 trillion currently to $59 trillion by 2035, Kevin.
Yeah, in the president's budget, we show balance, and the thing I can tell you is that under the CBO baseline, they're presuming 1.8% growth. If instead we get 3% growth, which I think is a lowball estimate of what we're going to get from all of these policies, then revenue goes up by $4 trillion. $4 trillion. And so in other words, the revenue that you get just from 3% growth is about enough to pay for the House bill, and that's even before any other add-on effects that we get and lower interest rates because of reduced deficits and so on. So we are the fiscally responsible party. And the one thing I could say is that if they don't pass this bill, anyone who votes not to pass this bill, like every Democrat in the House, then you're voting for the biggest tax hike in history. If you have the biggest tax hike in history, all of a sudden, because the Trump tax cuts expire, you're going to have a recession. The Council of Economic Advisors here has estimated that it would cause GDP to drop by 4%, cause deficits to skyrocket because you're giving payments to people who have lost their jobs and so on, and millions and millions of people losing their insurance because they lose their jobs. That's what you're voting for if you vote against this bill. And I don't think that any of these people who are budget hawks want to see the budget calamity that will happen if the bill doesn't pass. We have a recession, and then you really see what a deficit looks like.
Right. Well, look, certainly this bill stops a huge increase in taxes, largest that we've seen. You're right. But the last time you were on this program, you said that the U.S. second half growth is going to be potentially north of 4%. You said certainly 3% and possibly north of 4%. So you still feel that that's achievable in the second half then, Kevin?
Yeah. And did you see the consumer sentiment numbers that came out? So the people are starting to see that Trump policies are working. They had a couple of months where their sentiment was down because they were listening to the media saying, oh, this is going to be the end of the economy. But now we're seeing that the policies are working. You know, business investment is skyrocketing. Jobs are skyrocketing. Inflation's going down. It's exactly as we said. And the thing about where the 4% comes from is not just picking a number out of the air. What we've done by simulating the Trump tax cuts, we get to 3% growth very easily. And we said it's the same models that said it in 2017, and then we got it. You'll remember that, Maria.
Yeah.
The thing that's different this time is because artificial intelligence is diffusing all across the economy right now and increasing the productivity of every business. It's better at playing chess. It's better at managing inventories.
Yeah.
And that artificial intelligence productivity boom, estimates are that it's an extra 1 to 1.5% growth. And so if we get, say, the 1.5% growth out of AI plus the 3% from the taxes, it is mostly additive. And so you're looking at north of 4% growth. And that's where I got that number. It's not just picking a number out of the air.
Right. It's a great point on AI for sure. And I just spoke with the CEO of Citigroup, Jane Fraser, who's also using AI in her business. But she went back to an issue that we've talked about before, and being behind companies who are still reluctant to put real money to work, and that is clarity. Here's Jane Fraser with me just moments ago. Watch.
Every business leader and every investor prefers clarity. And I think we all know we've got to wait a little longer for that clarity, the tax bill, from tariffs, from what's going to happen on deregulation. But it's coming soon. Companies are being very actively engaged around what do they do next. They're ready to adapt. Once they have that clarity, they have different scenarios, they've got plans ready, and we've already seen M&A's been pretty active. I think it surprised us all by the fact that that's continued. We've seen some pausing of investment plans, we've seen some pausing of headcount and expansion, but probably not as much as everyone envisaged at the beginning.
So not as bad as we thought, but still you're seeing pausing. When would you expect clarity for corporate America, Kevin?
Well, first of all, remember the trade story that we're talking about, very, very important. It's about 14% of the economy. About 86% of the economy is the stuff that is going to be just booming the minute we pass the bill. And the trade issue will have some uncertainty until the courts settle down. That's going to happen very, very soon. But on the 86% of the economy, as soon as the bill passes, everybody's going to have all the clarity that they want. And I can tell you that people have that clarity already. And the reason I know is, don't forget that in Q1, we had a capital spending boom already because President Trump had the wisdom in the State of the Union address to say that whatever we do with these tax cuts is going to be retroactive to January 20th. And then all of a sudden, we had a huge 20% boom in equipment investment, 10% boom in capital spending, because in some sense, even though they're not officially there, the Trump tax cuts are already working because people know we're going to make those things retroactive. And so if Jane is right and that some people are holding off, imagine how good it's going to be, because when people are kind of uncertain and holding off, we got a 20% boom.
Yeah.
So what's the next move going to be, like 30%? But yes, we're very optimistic that the numbers are looking great. They're looking great because the tax cuts are working the way they did before, and we're multiplying by 2 by taking a lot of things and making them better and bigger. And that's where the growth's coming from, Maria.
All right, Kevin, we'll be watching that. Great analysis. We so appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
to see you.
All right.
As always.
Kevin Hassett at the White House.